Good evening. It's Friday, August 21st. Some progress in combating the onslaught of firestorms that hits California, especially the San Francisco Bay Area. Temperatures moderate a bit, the winds remain calm, and firefighters begin to gain a minimum amount of containment in some places. Bad news comes from the Weather Service, which issues a fire weather warning for Sunday of storms that could bring more fire-igniting lightning strikes. With 74 days until Election Day, President Trump's Postmaster General Louis DeJoy promises a Senate committee meeting today that election mail will be delivered on time.
I've had weekly reviews on this since before this all the excitement came out. We are very committed. The board's committed. The postal workers committed. The union, where our leadership is committed to having a successful election. The insinuation is, quite frankly, outrageous.
But Democrats warn that DeJoy's service cutbacks since arriving in June are causing an upheaval that threatens the election.
Mr. DeJoy, your decisions have cost Americans their health, their time, their livelihoods, and their peace of mind. I believe you owe them an apology for the harm you have caused, and you all of us, some very clear answers today.
Election officials in the key swing state of Wisconsin ruled that independent president candidate Kanye West and the Green Party's presidential candidate both failed to qualify for the ballot, meaning Joe Biden won't have to worry about losing votes to them in that state. In a sudden reversal, Russian doctors give the country's most prominent dissident, who's in a coma after a suspected poisoning, permission to be transferred abroad for medical treatment. His supporters think that that's because the poison can no longer be detected in his body. And a blow to police secrecy as a New York judge rules the cops' disciplinary records are public under a new state transparency law. From Pacifica Radio, KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Evening News. I'm Mark Miracle. New Postmaster General Louis DeJoy said today he has no plans to restore mailboxes and other agency cuts made since he took over in June, sparking fresh questions about how the Postal Service will ensure timely delivery of an expected surge of mail-in ballots for the November election. It was DeJoy's first time publicly answering questions since summer mail delays brought a public outcry. Testifying before a Senate committee today, the ally of President Donald Trump said it was his sacred duty that ballots arrive on time. But he told senators he did not yet have a plan for handling a crush of election mail. From the White House, Trump delivered fresh complaints over the mail-in ballots expected because of the coronavirus pandemic. KPFA's Kate Eder reports.
As concerns rise over recent delays in mail service, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy testified for the first time to the Senate. While being questioned by Michigan Democrat Gary Peters, DeJoy said he will not restore equipment like blue mail collection boxes and mail processing machines that have already been removed.
Will you be bringing back any mail sorting machines that have been removed since you've become Postmaster General? Will any of those come back?
There's no intention to do that. They're not needed, sir. As we head into the election season, I want to assure this committee and the American public that the Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's election mail securely and on time. This sacred duty is my number one priority between now and Election Day.
DeJoy became Postmaster General in June and is a donor and ally of President Trump. He has significant financial stakes in companies that do business or compete with the U.S. Postal Service, which has raised concerns about a conflict of interest. Since DeJoy took on the job, there has been public outcry over changes and delays in mail delivery across the country. This morning, demonstrators gathered in front of post offices around the country to protest the changes. Senator Peters says he started hearing from Michigan residents about problems with the Postal Service in July, shortly after DeJoy took office, but months after the coronavirus pandemic started affecting the agency's operations.
These are people who are coming forward, talking about delays, talking about medicine that's not available for them. So I sure shared the story with an individual who, because of the lack of medicine, skipped doses and was actually hospitalized. I fully appreciate that the COVID has created significant problems for the Postal Service. The service was there through the pandemic. It's just been in the middle of July where you see it dropping off dramatically. The COVID's been with us since March.
Democrats warn DeJoy's cost-cutting initiatives are causing problems that could threaten the upcoming presidential election. Though DeJoy maintains that the Postal Service is ready to handle the influx of mail-in ballots for the election, he admitted under questioning by New Hampshire Democrat Maggie Hassan that he hasn't yet completed an election plan.
Some states are starting to mail out general election ballots on September 4th, just 2 weeks from today. Mr. DeJoy, I'm just wondering, do you have a detailed plan about how you're going to ensure the kind of delivery that Americans count on for voting by mail? And could you share them by Sunday night so we can see what they are, please?
I don't think I will have the complete plan by Sunday night. We're just putting these committees together.
DeJoy has said that he will stop the removal of mail processing machines and blue mail collection boxes before November. But, as he admitted while being questioned by Delaware Democrat Tom Carper, DeJoy is planning even bigger changes for the Postal Service.
But we're going to need more information, especially given reports that came out last night showing that you and your team are actually considering more extreme changes than those we've seen today, including changes that will slow down the mail even further, post office and plant closings, price changes that will double the cost of voting by mail, dramatic price hikes on packages that will disproportionately impact small businesses in rural communities that rely on the Postal Service while erasing your competitive advantage over FedEx and UPS. Are you considering the dramatic service changes that I just outlined, which we just learned about in the last 48 hours?
We're considering dramatic changes to improve the service to the American people. Yes.
The House of Representatives will vote tomorrow on legislation that would prohibit the changes in the Postal Service and send $25 billion to the agency to help with operations. Reporting for KPFA Pacifica Radio, I'm Kate Ida.
Democratic attorneys general are claiming in a second multi-state lawsuit that recent Postal Service policy changes will undermine mail-in voting this November. The complaint against Postmaster General DeJoy and the agency was filed today in federal court in Philadelphia. The plaintiffs claim Postal Service changes have already caused problems and that agency leaders interfered with how states conduct elections according to the U.S. Constitution. The attorneys general say ballots may not be sent or received in time, and some voters may simply not vote out of concern their ballot won't get counted. Despite the Postmaster General's protestations, Maryland's Attorney General Brian Frosh says lawsuits that he and other AGs filed against the Postal Service this week will continue as planned. Diane Bernard has that story.
Speaking Wednesday at a Democratic National Convention Partners Talk online, Frosh says he'll keep fighting against what he calls the Trump administration's illegal actions that are slowing mail delivery and could undermine the Postal Service and the election.
We don't take DeJoy at his word. We're going to press forward. Whatever reforms and changes that are necessary to run a valid election in November, we're going to insist be in writing and approved by a court.
President Donald Trump blasted Republicans Wednesday for allowing Democrats to have what he called ridiculous post office hearings before and during the Republican National Convention. DeJoy will also testify on Monday, the first day of the RNC. Frosh appeared in an online session called The Power of Democratic AGs in upholding the rule of law. His counterparts from states including Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, and New York all highlighted their legal victories during the Trump presidency. Frosh talked about Maryland's efforts to save health care and take on crime and policing issues.
we stand up for important public policies. We were the first state in the nation to issue guidance to all law enforcement officers in Maryland to prohibit racial profiling.
Frosch also discussed recovering hundreds of millions of dollars for Marylanders from Wall Street banks, payday lenders, and polluters. The session was sponsored by the Democratic Attorneys General Association. For Public News Service, I'm Diane Bernard.
A federal judge has struck down Indiana's process of rejecting absentee ballots because of differing voter signatures, since the process did not require voters to be told about such decisions or offered a way to contest them. The decision prevents election officials from tossing out mailed-in absentee ballots with envelope signatures that don't match those on voter registration records unless the voters are given enough notice before Election Day. The judge found that county election workers are not trained in handwriting analysis to determine whether the voters' signatures match as required by state law. Joe Biden accepted the Democratic Party's presidential nomination at the party's convention last night, which came to an end, vowing to take on national crises and declaring that we will overcome this season of darkness. Biden promised he would move the country past the chaos of President Donald Trump's tenure.
May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here tonight, as love and hope and light join in the battle for the soul of the nation. And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you.
The convention also heard from Tammy Duckworth, an Illinois senator who lost her legs in Iraq and is raising 2 young children. She said Biden has common decency. Cory Booker, only the 9th African-American senator in U.S. history, said Biden believes in the dignity of all working Americans. And Pete Buttigieg, the 38-year-old former South Bend, Indiana mayor and a gay military veteran, noted that Biden came out in favor of same-sex marriage as vice president, even before President Barack Obama declared his support for the idea. Comedian Sarah Cooper, who's become a viral sensation for her videos lip-syncing Trump's speeches, put it bluntly, Donald Trump doesn't want any of us to vote because he knows he can't win fair and square. President Trump responded today, saying that where Joe Biden sees American darkness, he sees American greatness. He said the Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history. Trump spoke today in Arlington, Virginia, in a speech to the Republican-aligned Council for National Policy.
They spent 4 straight days attacking America as racist and a horrible country that must be redeemed. Joe Biden grimly declared a season of American darkness. And yet, look at what we've accomplished until the plague came in. Look at what we've accomplished.
In recent speeches, Trump himself has drawn stark images of unrest, of violence in American cities, and positioned himself as a defender of law and order. Biden has portrayed Trump as someone who tries to divide Americans. One of the only 2 Native women elected to Congress, New Mexico Congresswoman Deb Haaland, addressed the Democratic National Convention last night. Matt Laszlo reports.
President Donald Trump's administration has prized unwinding regulations, which has caused more dirty air and water in Indian country. New Mexico Democratic Congresswoman Deb Haaland is a citizen of the Pueblo of Laguna and one of just 2 Native American women ever elected to Congress. At the Democratic Party's virtual convention last evening, she told the audience that Native people's history, land, and lives matter.
I'm a symbol of our resilience as the embodiment of America's progress as a nation. I know we can't take our democracy for granted, especially now as people are dying, as our land is abused, as our Constitution is under attack. We must work for it.
To Haaland, that means Indian country needs to come out and vote this November.
Whether your ancestors have been here for hundreds of years or you're a new citizen, know this. Whether we vote and how we vote will determine if our nation's promise of social, racial, and environmental justice will outlast us.
Still, even in Holland's home state of New Mexico, Republicans have also embarked on an intense effort to court Native American and Latino voters. That's because each party recognizes how pivotal November's elections will be. For National Native News, I'm Matt Laszlo in Washington.
Wisconsin election officials decided today to keep rapper Kanye West off the battleground state's presidential ballot in November because his campaign turned in his nomination papers moments after the deadline. West announced in July he's running for president on a ticket he calls the birthday party. West has since been gathering signatures to get on the ballot in several states. Democrats allege that Republicans are pushing West's candidacy in several swing states to siphon African-American votes away from their candidate, Joe Biden. Wisconsin's expected to play a key role in deciding the election after President Trump narrowly won the state in 2016. A group of voters filed a complaint with the State Elections Commission earlier this month, alleging that West's campaign workers missed the 5 p.m. filing deadline on August 4th, the last day for independent presidential candidates, to submit the required 2,000 signatures from Wisconsin voters to get on the ballot. West's campaign attorney argued during a hearing before the commission that West campaign workers did not enter the commission's building until 14 seconds after the 5 p.m. deadline, but commission staff still accepted the papers, constituting a timely filing. But the bipartisan commission voted 5-1 to keep Kanye West and running mate Michelle Tidball off the ballot. The commission deadlocked 3-3 twice on whether to allow Green Party presidential candidate Howie Hawkins on the ballot, which means he also won't appear on it. Hawkins' presence on the ballot could pull liberal-leading voters from Biden as well. The Green Party's 2016 presidential candidate, Jill Stein, won 31,006 votes in the state, more than Trump's 22,177 vote margin over Democrat Hillary Clinton in Wisconsin. You're listening to the Evening News on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. Wildfires that took at least 6 lives and forced tens of thousands of people from their homes blazed throughout California today as firefighting resources strained under the vastness of the conflagrations. 3 major complexes encompassing dozens of fires chewed through a combined 780 square miles of forests, canyons, and rural areas flanking San Francisco on 3 sides. Statewide, nearly 12,000 firefighters are battling blazes that have scorched more than 1,200 square miles. Crews from Oregon, Idaho, and Arizona have arrived to relieve local firefighters, with engines on their way from as far away as Maryland and New Jersey. Tens of thousands of homes are threatened by flames. Fire officials said some fires doubled in size within the last 24 hours. Christina Onnested reports.
Fires raging across California have scorched landmass larger than the size of Rhode Island, 771,000 acres. The vast majority is in the San Francisco Bay Area, which nearly doubled in size in one day, burning through nearly 500,000 acres, killing at least 6 people as others remain missing. While state officials say they're getting some containment on the fires in the North Bay, East Bay, and South Bay areas, caused by some 12,000 lightning strikes over the course of 3 days. They also note the battle is far from over. Here's California Governor Gavin Newsom.
These lightning strikes came exact week that we were experiencing some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded in human history. 130-degree temperatures in the southern part of the state of California. Arguably, still an open question, maybe the hottest modern recorded temperature in the history of the world. Just a day ago, I announced that we are struggling to address the needs of suppressing some 376 fires in this state. That number has grown to about 560 fires.
More than 12,000 firefighters are battling blazes with engines on the way from as far as New Jersey and Maryland. Crews from Oregon, Idaho, and Arizona have already arrived to assist in firefighting efforts. And those efforts are against historically large fires. Newsom says a complex of some 20 fires in the South Bay, known as SCU, raging in Santa Clara, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, and Stanislaus counties, is the 7th largest fire in state history. That scorched nearly 230,000 acres in 2 days. It is 10% contained. More than 1,100 personnel are battling the blazes. 2 people have been injured. The complex of fires in the North Bay, called the LNU, impacting Sonoma, Solano, Napa, Lake, and Yolo counties, is the 10th largest fire in state history. The inferno has blazed through more than 219,000 acres and destroyed some 480 structures, damaging 125 structures and killed at least 5 people. The bodies of 3 people were found in a home that burned in Napa. In Solano County, authorities report the death of a male resident. At least 2 other people were missing, and more than 30 civilians and firefighters have been injured, according to authorities. The LNU complex is close to encompassing Lake Berryessa. Another portion of it is headed towards Guerneville. Forestville and Lake Sonoma areas have been evacuated. State Assembly member Cecilia Aguirre-Curie of Winters says her entire district is under threat.
It breaks my heart that we've lost 4 lives. I almost thought I lost one of my best friends. Couldn't find her for 12 hours, and we found her. She's fine, and luckily her home's fine. But I have a half a dozen really good friends that don't have a home right now. And getting back on their feet are going to be tough. And so we will have to all stay together again, helping people. It takes a long time.
The fire in San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties, CZU complex, remains uncontained. An evacuation warning was issued for much of Scotts Valley. Felton has already been evacuated. More than 60,000 people have been ordered evacuated. Most of the evacuations have taken place in Santa Cruz, including the University of California at Santa Cruz. Authorities are urging people to heed evacuation warnings. In Sonoma County, Sheriff Mike Essick says a horn high-low system is meant to warn people of an evacuation order. He says when people hear the siren, it's a sign to go. But he says people should be prepared to leave before that siren goes off.
We want you to leave when you've been ordered to evacuate. Evacuation zones are dangerous. They contain many hazards for the public, and that's why we're asking you to leave those areas. Additionally, evacuation zones have active firefighting efforts going on, and you remaining in those areas could hamper firefighting efforts. So please, if you've been evacuated, stay out of that area. You will hear the high-low sirens as one of the ways that we notify you of evacuations. In addition to alerts that you may see on your phone or media alerts that you may receive, when deputies or peace officers are in your actual neighborhood trying to evacuate people, you will hear the high-low siren, and when you hear that siren, high-low means it's time to go.
The collection of 3 major complexes in the Northeast and South Bay and Santa Cruz have burned more than 650 square miles. Officials have tried to put up evacuated people in hotels instead of in congregate shelters to slow the spread of COVID-19. Unhealthy air conditions are expected to persist for the foreseeable future due to the smoke and ash from the wildfires. Health officials urge everyone to remain indoors as much as possible, especially children, older people, and those with chronic health conditions. In addition to unhealthy air quality around the Bay Area, a fire weather watch goes in effect starting Sunday, when a new spate of lightning is possible. Ryan Wahlberg is incident meteorologist for the CZU fire complex in Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties.
This morning we did get a little bit of a marine push, so we had some higher humidities on the lower slopes that helped moderate some of the fire behavior. But up high where things are still burning actively on the Canyon and Calaveras fire zones, things continue to be very warm and dry. We're not expecting too much change today or tomorrow, so firefighters are going to try to take advantage of that more beneficial weather. Still do get some gusty winds that come through and challenge some of the activity up here on the Deer Zone and the northern portions of the Canyon fire. As we look towards later in the weekend, we are watching the chance of another threat of lightning that is a concern.
Although temperatures were predicted to ease slightly, they're also expected to be hot enough that firefighters will not be able to count on cool evening weather aiding them. Erratic winds could also drive the fires unpredictably in multiple directions, state fire officials say. I'm Christina Onnestet, reporting for KPFA.
This afternoon, the National Weather Service in San Francisco issued a fire weather watch from Sunday morning to next Tuesday morning, saying lightning will likely spark new fires across the region, including in remote areas. The LNU lightning complex of fires in the North Bay grew slightly overnight to over 219,000 acres. As of this morning, CAL FIRE said it was at 7% containment, up from 0 the day before. The fires continue to burn in southern Lake County, as well as across Napa, Solano, Sonoma, and Yolo counties, with 30,500 structures threatened, 480 structures destroyed, 125 damaged. In Napa County alone, over 13,000 residents have been ordered to evacuate. The county, in conjunction with the Red Cross, is providing sheltering service to nearly 200 of the evacuees. KPFA reporter Karen Argood spoke with two of them who shared their stories of the loss of their home on Monday when the fires started.
I met Lean and Catalina, who only want their first names used, in the parking lot at Crosswalk Community Church in Napa. The evacuation shelter is located here next to the Highway 29 off-ramp. With the rushing noise of the highway behind them, they sat together chatting under an umbrella in the sweltering heat, next to a car filled with Lean's dog, 7 cats, and a small camper trailer. Wary of me at first, the media, they relaxed when they realized it was only radio. So it didn't matter that they hadn't showered for days, and they shared their stories. They had been neighbors for years in the Spanish Flat mobile villa on the western shore of Lake Berryessa when the LNU lightning complex blaze blasted through, burning their homes to the ground. Lean was one of the last to flee the mobile home park.
The fire is already in front of the mobile villa. And we loaded the last pet we have, and we took off. And by the time I look around, the fire is already start swallowing unit per unit of the mobile home, one at a time. The villa became a villa of ashes. And it's I don't know how to explain and how to describe that wherever you look is fire. You know your neighborhood, you know your place. It's just hurt.
She pulls out her iPhone, wanting to share what she saw and how she felt watching her home and her neighbors' homes devoured in flames.
Oh, please, they're not gonna burn our park. They're not gonna burn our park. Oh my God, it's in here. Oh my God, it's behind us. Oh my goodness.
Lean had lived in the Spanish Flats with her husband for 11 years.
I don't know how to explain. It's painful. I'm done crying. I got hurt so much after so many years that invested and lost everything. Lost of our life. I rescue what I can rescue, what we can rescue. And the rest, we just give it to the trust to the Almighty.
Her neighbor Catalina says she's lucky she got out in time with all 3 of her dogs.
But dogs are easier to get in the car than cats. So she really had to go and get them. She got all scratched and stuff, but she had to do it. It was unbelievable, You saw the fire on the ridge, and somebody said, "Oh, we have to get out of here." Because, if you can see the fire, it's coming. So it was awful. It was really awful.
Lean says they are grateful they survived, but don't know where to begin again, especially with the added burden of the coronavirus.
Right now, we don't know how to start, and we're with this, along with dealing with the virus. It's even hard to ask some help because themselves lose their job from the virus issue, or some closing businesses and anything. They're affected with that. They're suffering already, that alone. The virus you're dealing, the temperature, the over 100 degrees, no power. After that, the thunder, you don't know. You feel like the world is closing. It's like the end of the world.
Catalina, an accountant, and Lean, a caregiver, are both currently unemployed due to COVID, and neither have insurance. The Red Cross is helping to shelter the women for the next 8 days, and they are hopeful that FEMA will help. Lean says perhaps disasters like this help us remember we are all the same.
No matter who you are, what color your eyes, your skin, your hair, we have to treat each other as one, as a human. Because during this kind of disaster happening, we have to help each other. By the end of the day, that 15 minutes, whatever you got that you feel you're higher, you end up the same. As if like when you pray, don't pray only for yourself. Pray for the whole world. Really, thank you for everyone. And thank you for the Lord God for saving us and keep us alive.
For KPFA, I'm Karen Argood.
Meanwhile, President Trump was at it again with his "I told them to rake the forest floor" shtick, blaming California for its wildfires and saying he might cut off federal funding.
But they have massive fires again in California. Maybe we're just going to have to make them pay for it because they don't listen to us. We say you got to get rid of the leaves, you got to get rid of the debris, you got to get rid of the fallen trees. When a tree falls, after 13 to 14 months, it becomes extremely dry. You look at some of these fires, they don't really catch where the trees are growing because they're wet. The water's pouring up the tree. And they just don't want to listen. They mocked us when I said that. You got to clean your floors, just an expression. Clean the floors. And they have many, many years, decades of leaves, dry leaves.
The federal government controls more than 1/2 of California's forest lands, state and local entities, just 3%. Governor Gavin Newsom said anyone who, like Trump, doubts the reality of climate change should just look at what's happening in the state.
Just today, the President of the United States threatened the state of California, 40 million Americans that happen to live here in the state of California, to defund our efforts on wildfire suppression because he said we hadn't raked enough leaves. You can't make that up.
Today, Newsom said that despite what Trump publicly says about wildfires in the state, his administration has been responsive to Newsom's requests for federal aid. You're listening to the Evening News on KPFA in Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. It's an hour-long newscast, airs each night at 6. There's a half-hour edition on the weekends, and it's available for you whenever you like because it's archived online at kpfa.org. I'm Mark Miracle. A federal judge turned down President Donald Trump's newest move today to keep New York City prosecutors from getting his tax records. But Trump's lawyers have already asked higher courts to step in. The developments came a day after U.S. District Judge Victor Marrero ruled, as he had before in a case that has been to the U.S. Supreme Court and back that Manhattan's top prosecutor could subpoena the records for a criminal investigation. Trump's lawyers immediately appealed Thursday's ruling. They also asked Judge Marrero to delay enforcement of the subpoena while the appeal plays out. Judge Marrero said no to that today, writing that the president has not demonstrated that he will suffer irreparable harm if the records are turned over for a grand jury probe that would keep them secret. However, Trump's lawyers noted in a court filing that they are making the same request for a delay of an appeals court and the Supreme Court. A former oil industry attorney will continue for now calling the shots at a government agency that oversees nearly 250 million public acres in the western states. That's despite the White House saying over last weekend that President Donald Trump would withdraw the nomination of William Perry Pendley. A document obtained this week by the Associated Press shows Pendley's rule over the Interior Department's Bureau of Land Management will continue under an arrangement that Pendley himself set up months ago. He signed an order in May that makes his own position the Bureau's default leader while the director's post is vacant. That would leave him in control of an agency that oversees oil and gas drilling, grazing, and other activities on vast areas in the U.S. West. Details of the succession plan prompted Democrats to renew their calls for Pendley's removal. Eric Tegetoff reports.
A chorus of voices is growing louder for the Trump administration to withdraw William Perry Pendley's nomination as director of the Bureau of Land Management. Pendley's past as a self-proclaimed sagebrush rebel and his advocacy to sell public lands to states has put him in hot water with groups in the West. Doug Krings is a board member in Montana for backcountry hunters and anglers.
I don't know of any worse candidate for this job than William Perry Pendley. Just his track record of supporting the disposal of millions of acres of public land. He's the wrong guy for the job, for something that we want to keep in perpetuity.
The Bureau of Land Management manages more than 8 million acres of public land in Montana, according to the Montana Wilderness Association. Pendley says he set aside his personal beliefs and follows the administration's lead on policy as acting BLM director. The policy of energy dominance has been the Trump administration's major thrust on federal lands. Krings says Pendley has helped push this policy past the balanced approach BLM is supposed to take on managing public lands.
Mineral extraction and timber harvest are all part of this puzzle. I feel like the pendulum has swung a little far when it comes to habitat destruction and extraction.
Pendley has been acting director of BLM for more than a year, leading to calls for a formal nomination process by the Senate and lawsuits from watchdog groups and Governor Steve Bullock over his informal position. Montana Senator John Tester and others have called on confirmation hearings to start soon. Krings says how Western senators vote on his confirmation will say a lot about how they feel toward public lands.
Public lands are a very important issue for Montanans as a whole, whether they use them for hunting and fishing or just recreation, bird watching, whatever. I'd say that it's going to turn elections in Montana.
For Public News Service, I'm Eric Tegetoff.
The White House did not give any reason for why the Pendley nomination was being withdrawn in disclosing its plans 6 days ago. The withdrawal, however, won't become final until the Senate returns to session. Meanwhile, Montana's Democratic governor is asking a federal judge to take swift action to remove Pendley from office, contending he's breaking the law since his appointment is illegal. Russian doctors gave the country's most prominent dissident, who is in a coma after a suspected poisoning, permission to be transferred abroad for medical treatment, in a sudden reversal today that came after more than 24 hours of contention over Alexei Navalny's condition and treatment. Navalny, a 44-year-old politician and corruption investigator who is one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiercest critics, was admitted to an intensive care unit in the Siberian city of Omsk on Thursday. His supporters believe that tea he drank was laced with poison and that the Kremlin is behind both his illness and the delay in transferring him to a top German hospital. Navalny's wife, Julia, in translation by Al Jazeera.
We certainly believe that it was made to make sure that a chemical substance which is in Alexei's body will dissolve. That's why he's not handed over. He's not in a good shape, and we certainly cannot trust this hospital, and we demand him to be handed over to us so that we can be able to treat him in an independent hospital with doctors we trust.
More from reporters Simon Marks.
Russia appears to have agreed to allow opposition leader Alexei Navalny to be flown in an air ambulance to Germany 2 days after he fell ill, the victim of an apparent poisoning. Doctors in Siberia, where Mr. Navalny has been in a coma, previously insisted he was too ill to travel. He's expected to leave Russia within the next few hours after his wife urged the authorities to relent. Mark Galliotti is a Russia analyst at the Royal United Services Institute in London.
Obviously, until he's actually on a plane and out of Russian airspace, we can't be certain. But that definitely seems to be it. And it's a combination, likely, of international pressure on Putin and, if I were a cynic, that they've given it long enough for whatever poison was in him to then be diffused through his bloodstream and maybe less easy to detect.
Russian doctors say they believe Mr. Navalny is suffering from a carbohydrate disorder. He is by no means the only Russian opposition figure to find themselves on the receiving end of poison. Max Seddon is with the Financial Times in Moscow.
It happened to the husband of one of Navalny's top lieutenants a few years ago. He was attacked outside his house by a man with a syringe who injected him with some sort of unknown substance. More recently, it also happened to a man, Pyotr Verzilev, an artist who you may remember did the pitch invasion at the World Cup final. He was in a coma for several days, had to be flown to Berlin.
But whoever poisoned Alexei Navalny was trying to remove an absolutely critical opposition figure in Moscow. Nikolai Petrov is a Russia analyst with Chatham House in London.
He became especially popular 2 years ago. He is well known for his very successful campaign of smart voting last time in regional elections. That's why he makes understandable threat for the Kremlin.
The Kremlin said it wished Mr. Navalny a speedy recovery. President Trump said the State Department is looking into the case, but he expressed no concern nor sent sympathies to Mr. Navalny and his family, unusual given America's long-held insistence on the need for a vibrant Russian opposition. Simon Marks reporting.
Health officials in California are concerned about statistics showing a substantial decline in child vaccination rates since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Mark Galley, California's Health and Human Services Secretary, said that the number of children vaccinated for measles, mumps, and rubella as they prepare to enter elementary school plummeted when schools and businesses closed in the spring. He said so far this year, California has seen childhood vaccinations fall by about a third from a year ago. Galley said health officials are also planning for the double whammy of the coronavirus and the flu in the coming months. He said the flu usually ends up stressing hospitals, and they are also now, the hospitals that is, grappling with coronavirus cases.
Outbreaks of flu and COVID together will certainly cause a drain on already scarce healthcare resources. We've been talking to you for many months about preparing our surge capacity in hospitals and even in our clinic settings, and that will become even more vital as we prepare for admissions increase not just around COVID, but around flu as well.
Galley said California has reported about 62,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in kids, about 10% of the state's overall cases, and nearly 600 children have been hospitalized with the disease. County health officials have approved reopening of dozens of California elementary schools with in-person instruction under special waivers in counties that were placed on a state monitoring list because of high numbers of coronavirus infections. State health authorities haven't said how many have been approved statewide, but data from San Diego and Orange counties alone showed they have had 50 schools approved, all of them private and mostly religious, along with 2 small public school districts. A small public school district in rural San Bernardino County that was first approved last week opened its classrooms yesterday. Some other counties on the state's monitoring list have also been receiving waiver applications, including Marin and Kern. Santa Clara County said it approved some, but it did not say how many or whether they also were approved by the state. Alameda County is not accepting waiver applications right now. California recorded 5,752 new cases of COVID-19 yesterday and 138 deaths. The 7-day average of new cases has been declining. Meanwhile, according to a new poll, 9 out of 10 Massachusetts parents are concerned their children will catch COVID-19 if school buildings open up there anytime soon. Laura Brosbrow-Tellem reports.
The Massachusetts Teachers Association commissioned the poll from Echo Cove Research and Consulting, which surveyed 600 voters online. MTA President Mary Najimy says she's been in touch with tens of thousands of members who overwhelmingly prefer a remote start to the school year.
We've come to the conclusion that it isn't safe to return to in-person learning until several criteria are met.
These include better ventilation indoors and transmission rate benchmarks. Massachusetts teachers' unions are calling for a remote start and to phase in a physical return once these criteria are met. However, more than 2/3 of school districts are planning for at least some in-person instruction. The most popular option is a hybrid of remote and in-person learning. While districts have filed their reopening plans, they still need to negotiate these terms with local educator unions. Najimy emphasizes that free testing with fast results is critical to reopening schools.
Some of the college students that are going back to the private schools are now going to be tested with rapid testing twice a week for the first month of school. We've got to be able to replicate that in public education.
So far, she says the state is failing to satisfy their requirements to go back to school safely. The MTA and other educators held a day of action this week across the state to urge a remote start to the academic year. I'm Laura Rossbrow-Tellem, reporting for Public News Service.
You're listening to the Evening News on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online, kpfa.org.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Edwards-Teekert.
And I'm Kat Brooks.
Weekday mornings we host Upfront.
2 hours of conversation about what's in the news and what should be.
Politics, technology.
Prisons, police.
What's happening in City Hall and at the State House.
In Washington and in the streets.
That's starting at 7 a.m., right after Democracy Now!
On Upfront.
100 years ago this year, the Constitution of the United States was amended to forbid any state from using gender to deny a person the right to vote. In 1919, Wisconsin was the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. In the next year, 35 other states followed that lead. Mike Moen reports.
Next week formally marks the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote in the United States. Wisconsin played an important role in the 19th Amendment, but there's mixed history behind the movement that's still playing out. Tennessee often gets attention as the last state needed to ratify the 19th Amendment in 1920, but a year prior to that, Wisconsin was the first state to approve it. Simone Munson of the Wisconsin Historical Society says, like other parts of the country, the suffragist movement saw plenty of struggles in the Badger State before lawmakers finally took action.
Wisconsin is not a pro-temperance state. We didn't support the prohibition of alcohol. And so women in Wisconsin did have an uphill battle when they were advocating for suffrage because the men often thought that it would align with taking away alcohol.
It wasn't until World War I, when women maintained the economy while men went to battle, that the legislature took notice. But Munson says black women were still prevented in many ways from voting. She notes the 19th Amendment was a launching point for other civil rights movements, and that calls for equality are still evident in many of today's protests. Munson believes there are many assumptions made by those who have never had hardships casting a ballot. She thinks a more comprehensive teaching of the 70-year struggle behind the suffragist movement could open more eyes about other struggles that persist.
If we look at how we teach history and if those explanations became more of the conversation in education, it might change how people view the rights they have today.
The 19th Amendment was certified by the U.S. Secretary of State on August 26, 1920. Next Wednesday, Munson says people are being encouraged to wear white and ring bells at noon, which is how women celebrated 100 years ago. Because of the pandemic, formal celebrations will be held virtually. Mike Moen, Public News Service.
3 Democratic state attorneys general have asked a court to declare that the Equal Rights Amendment is valid and part of the U.S. Constitution. The attorneys general of Virginia, Illinois, and Nevada made the motion in a lawsuit they first filed in January, after Virginia became the key 38th state to ratify the amendment. The Federal National Archives and Records Administration announced it would not certify the ERA after that happened. The Trump administration has previously asked the court to dismiss this case. With scores of disciplinary records already online, a federal judge today lifted a temporary restraining order that had barred New York City's police watchdog agency, police department, and other entities from making such information public. The judge's ruling, a blow to police unions seeking a way around a new state transparency law, came a day after the New York chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union won an appeals court consent to publish records of 320,000 New York Police Department complaints dating back to the mid-1980s. Facebook announced this week that it would crack down on groups and accounts affiliated with QAnon, a fringe conspiracy that alleges top Democrats are involved in organized child sex trafficking. QAnon groups were restricted, along with some militia and anarchist groups. KPFA's Chris Lee reports.
While most Americans have never heard of the QAnon conspiracy, President Donald Trump tacitly approved of its pro-Trump adherents, calling them, quote, people who love our country, unquote, at a White House press briefing earlier this week. Trump went on to say that QAnon supporters want him to suppress the protests in Democrat-led cities like Portland, Chicago, and New York. Several Republicans have sought to distance themselves from QAnon, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who told a Fox News reporter there is, quote, no place for QAnon in the Republican Party, unquote. During a CNN interview, Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois said Republican leaders need to denounce QAnon.
Basically very vague conspiracy theories about this satanic network in the government that Trump was sent to basically tear out. It's had predictions about this thing called the Storm, which is a mass roundup and arrest of everybody and execution of thousands of people. And people have adhered to this. And, you know, again, what happens is if it kind of confirms what you already believe and it's dark, it's really attractive in some cases. So I hadn't addressed it for a while, but it started to make it into the mainstream. And now I think is when it's important for leaders to come out and push back on it, because it's already had the attention, frankly, it doesn't deserve.
Other Republicans who have dismissed QAnon are Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska and Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming. During a CBS interview, Vice President Mike Pence also renounced the conspiracy. Viral conspiracies like QAnon came to prominence in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. At that time, the Washington Post reported on a disinformation campaign which alleged that leaked emails between John Podesta and then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton contained coded messages and revealed a fictitious child sex trafficking ring run by top-ranking Democratic Party officials. Today's QAnon theories bear a striking resemblance to that earlier conspiracy. Many cast President Donald Trump as a hero, waging a secret campaign against a so-called deep state network of prominent Democrats and celebrities who engage in pedophilia and drink the blood of their victims in in satanic rituals. In May, the FBI released a bulletin which labeled QAnon an extremist movement and likely to incite violence. Last year, the Southern Poverty Law Center warned QAnon conspiracies are becoming increasingly popular with anti-government extremists. In response to the growing popularity of QAnon conspiracies on its platform, Facebook has removed about 800 QAnon groups so far. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg explains why his company decided to take that content down.
There's no newsworthy exemption to content that incites violence or suppresses voting. And even if a politician or government official says it, if we determine the content may lead to violence or deprive people of their right to vote, we're going to take that content down, no matter who says it.
In addition to QAnon groups, a number of militia groups and prominent anarchist media organizations were also taken down. Some critics say restricting QAnon conspiracy theories on Facebook was long overdue, but say taking down anarchist groups from the platform in the same swoop is like comparing apples to oranges. During a Senate Judiciary hearing earlier this month, Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas extended the same false equivalency. Cruz excoriated Democrats for not speaking out against Antifa.
I emphatically agree that white supremacists are ignorant, bigoted morons, and those who are violent should be criminally prosecuted and locked up. But at the same time, it's fairly striking that elected Democrats want to ignore the violence of Antifa.
Cruz repeatedly made baseless accusations that Antifa anarchists were behind the killing of black security guard Patrick Underwood during George Floyd protests in Oakland, despite Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois' attempt to correct him. Stephen Carrillo, a former Air Force sergeant and a white supremacist, was charged for that killing. To date, not a single death has been attributed to Antifa, whereas, according to the Anti-Defamation League, far-right white supremacists were responsible for 73% of extremist murders between 2009 and 2018. The anarchist publisher Crime Think and the news website It's Going Down, which airs a program of the same name on Fridays at noon on KPFA, were both mentioned during that hearing, and both recently had their pages taken down from Facebook. In response, It's Going Down tweeted, quote, "This line of thinking continues to equate protest disruption and property destruction with far-right movements who fundamentally want to harm and kill large segments of the public." I'm Chris Lee, reporting for KPFA.
A white police officer in Georgia has been fired after an arrest captured on video showed him using a stun gun on a black woman. Gwinnett County Police said in a statement that Africa Michael Oxford was fired today after an investigation found his conduct violated the department's policy. The arrest on Tuesday was filmed on the front porch of a Loganville home and has been viewed since by millions of people on a video sharing app. Police had said the officer was searching for a suspect accused of property damage. A video showed him speaking with another woman before grabbing her, stunning her, struggling with her in the bushes in front of the home. A Pentagon report concludes that the use of National Guard reconnaissance planes in 4 U.S. cities to monitor the widespread protests earlier this year did not violate rules against the military collecting intelligence on Americans. The investigation by the Air Force Inspector General found that the planes were used to gather information about crowd size, crowd flows, and fires, but they did not monitor individuals. The probe was ordered by Defense Secretary Mark Esper in response to questions about whether the military illegally conducted surveillance of American citizens during the unrest after the death of George Floyd. And protesters in Portland clashed again with federal agents outside a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE building that's become a new focus of the demonstrations that have gripped Portland for months. Morning clouds predicted tomorrow in the San Francisco Bay Area. Sun by the afternoon with a high of 70 degrees around the bay. Further inland will be partly cloudy skies and highs in the mid-90s. In the central San Joaquin Valley tomorrow, partly cloudy with a high of 103 degrees. And it should be partly cloudy skies in Los Angeles tomorrow with a high of 90 degrees. That's it for the news tonight. Thanks for joining us. Good evening.
This is a community announcement for August 2020. The dynamic Miss Faye Carroll offers an East Bay one-day workshop on Saturday, August 22nd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The one-day workshop includes group singing, harmony, improvisation, games, and a chance to win exclusive Faye Carroll apparel. Face coverings and spatial distancing are mandatory. Space is limited. For details and to apply, contact Ms. Carroll at faycarrollbiz@gmail.com. This community announcement is produced by the First Voice Apprenticeship Program. Please send your event for consideration to calendar@kpfa.org. You can hear this announcement again at 848-6767, extension 621, or view it online at kpfa.org.